Welcome to the podcast Growth Series. If you're ready to grow your audience, increase your downloads, and finally see your podcast gain the traction it deserves, this series is for you. Over the next 12 episodes, I'll guide you step by step through strategies to help you understand your audience, make your content more discoverable, and create episodes that listeners love to share. This isn't just a series for inspiration or fluff. It is designed to help you achieve real, tangible growth. Each episode is built on the last, giving you practical, actionable insights you can implement right away. By the end, you have a complete system for sustainable podcast growth, and you have achieved real progress towards the audience and impact you've always wanted. So grab your notebook and pen, and let's get started. One of the things that I have realized over the years is that a lot of podcasters don't actually understand what are the key metrics that they need to keep track of so they know that their podcast is growing month over month. So today we're going to talk about analytics and why I love it so much. And by the end of this episode, you're going to understand the essential metrics that you can track, especially if you feel overwhelmed or unsure where to start. And this episode is really going to help you measure what matters so you can build and grow. And we're going to do that intentionally, not emotionally. So, of course, if you're a podcaster, and for the intent of this episode, we're focusing on audio podcasting, the downloads matter. What I recommend that you do is that you track your downloads on a monthly basis and also on a weekly basis after your episode goes live. For example, if you launch an episode on Wednesday, okay, if it goes live on Wednesday the 1st, how many downloads did that episode get by Wednesday the 8th? So I want you to track the first 7-day downloads of your episode. And also I want you to get in the habit of tracking your 30-day downloads for the same episode. So for example, if you release 4 episodes a month, you're going to be doing that for every single episode that you're launching. And then the other metric for you to keep an eye on is your overall downloads. And that is something that I recommend that you track on a monthly basis. Now, it is very important that you don't get caught up in checking your downloads every single day and you just refresh your podcast host every 5 minutes. Literally, I just want you to go in on a weekly basis, check how many downloads your episode got within 7 days, and then after 30 days, that is all we're going to do. And then, of course, at the end of the month, every month, I want you to check overall how many downloads did your episode get. Now, my goal for you is that your overall downloads are always growing month over month. One thing to keep in mind is that if it's summer or the holidays or if there's something going on around the world, your downloads are going to dip. So before you start freaking out that your downloads didn't grow from last month, just take a look around. Is there anything unusual going on? Is it the holidays? Is it the summertime? Because that is very common and it's not a reason for you to get worried. It's just normal. It's going to happen. It happens across the board with all podcasters. Now, again, going back to what I was saying before, consistent growth is what you want. Even small increases are good. Now, what happens if your episode was growing and all of a sudden there was a sudden drop? Well, there is a time for you to go ahead and just make sure that something didn't get disconnected. You know, it has happened to me in the past years ago that something happened and my Podbean, which is where I host my podcast, got disconnected from Apple. So it was an easy fix. So just make sure that if you have a sudden drop and it's not summer, it's not a holiday, everything seems okay. Otherwise, just make sure that everything's connected. Make sure that your Spotify didn't get disconnected or something like that, because obviously that's going to throw off your downloads. Now, I cannot move on with this episode without talking about buying downloads. Please do not buy downloads. Do not pay promoters. If you are on Facebook and if you have ever asked the question of how do I grow my podcast, you have gotten somebody in your inbox telling you that they'll promote your podcast and they promise you a certain amount of downloads. Please do not fall for that. You can get penalized by Apple. They can find out that you're buying downloads. They don't like it. And honestly, it's just fake. It doesn't mean anything and it doesn't help you. So do not buy fake downloads. If you have done it in the past, maybe you didn't know you're buying fake downloads, but if that is something you did, don't do it anymore. I have heard of people who pay for fake downloads so that they can hit the Apple charts. Guys, that is a very slippery slope to go on. It's fake. It doesn't mean anything. Like, it's just vain and it doesn't help you. And like, what is the point? So be honest here and don't fall for any promoters in your inbox telling you that they'll help you get more downloads. The key to get more downloads is, of course, SEO. Go back to the beginning of the series, all the way back to January, February, March, where we really talked about SEO, and focus on that because that is what is going to help you get more podcast downloads. Now, aside from downloads, one thing that I want you to focus on is listener retention. So for this, I recommend that you go on Apple. So you're going to need to log into Apple Podcast Connect. And I want you to go in there and I want you to see how much of your podcast are people listening to. Because if people are only listening to like 5, 10, 20% of your episode, that's problematic. You want people to at least get to 75%. Now, what if people are dropping off like at the 50% mark? Well, there are two reasons. Well, there are many reasons, but there are two main reasons that I want you to think about. First one is a hard pill to swallow, but is your podcast episode actually good? Because if it's not, and people feel like your episode sucks, they're going to drop off. So that's one thing. You really need to be able to be honest with yourself. And if you're not sure, I do podcast audits. I will leave the information linked for you down in the show notes so that I can listen to your show and I will give you very honest feedback on what's happening with your podcast and how to fix it. Another reason that people are not sticking around with their podcast is because your episodes are just too long. So if that is the case, if consistently you see that people are dropping off at the 50% mark or so, or, even like 40, 45%, ask yourself, is this podcast episode way too long? Because if it is, it's an easy fix. We can just shorten the podcast episode and hopefully your retention rate is going to go up. So retention is also something else that we want to look for. Again, going back to buying downloads, you can buy downloads all day, right? Like if you're trying to get sponsors and you're like, hey, sponsor, I've got 1,000 downloads in a day for my podcast episode. And they ask you, okay, well, average retention rate. Well, you're going to be very embarrassed if it's like, it's nothing, right? If it's very low, if it's 5, 10%. And that is one of the many downsides of buying downloads. So make sure that people are engaging with your podcast. And like I said, Apple Podcast Connect is the best way for you to check this out. It's going to give you, and of course, it's only going to be a portion because not everybody who listens to your podcast listens on Apple, but it'll give you very good data. And from Apple, you can infer how everybody else is interacting with your podcast. Now, I will say this. If you consistently get, let's say you get 200 downloads per episode within the first 7 days, and then you release a podcast episode and it just doesn't do as well, maybe got, 120, but all the other episodes stayed consistent, don't freak out. Maybe the topic didn't resonate, maybe the title wasn't good, but I wouldn't just sit here and obsess over one single episode. I would just look at the data, which is why it's something huge that we do here in our agency, is that every single month we spend a lot of time looking at the data so that we can tell our clients, okay, this is what performed well, this is what didn't, this is what this means. So we help our clients interpret the data so they can make better decisions and they can record more episodes based on data, right? Because we don't want to base any decisions off of our feelings or how we're vibing that day, because that's pretty much always going to lead us astray. So data is your friend, but don't get hung up if you have one-off episodes that don't perform as well. That's just data. That's just, what is the data telling you? Don't get hung up here. So your homework prompt is ready and waiting for you. So if you are not in my email list, if you're not subscribed to get the monthly homework prompt, make sure that you sign up. It'll be linked in the show notes for you. And you're going to have a lot of fun analyzing your data this month, because this is going to give you so much clarity. And from that clarity, you're going to be able to make better decisions to grow your podcast faster. And next month, I am super excited because next month I am teaching you how to look at the data and how to interpret the data so that you can record binge-worthy episodes that keep your listener hooked. And when that happens, your podcast is going to grow so much faster. That paired with SEO is a secret sauce right there. So make sure that you tune back in October 1st for the next episode in the series. Thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast Growth Series. Here's what to do next. Number 1, head over to julianabarbati.com/homework to grab your homework assignment for today's episode and start taking action on what you learned. Number 2, subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss the next step in your podcast growth journey. And number 3, come back on the 1st of the month next month for the next episode in the series. Until then, stay focused, take action, and don't let distraction pull you away from building the podcast you have always envisioned. You've got this, and I'll see you next month.